Joining me now here in Washington, the chair of the House Armed Services Committee, Congressman Mac Thornberry. Mr. Chairman, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
What do you make of the events in North Korea this week? First of all, that display, that impressive display of weapons, some of which we hadn't seen before, and then the launch, yes, failed, but still the launch of a ballistic missile despite President Trump's warnings.
Well, I think the message was, we are strong and we can hurt you. That's what
the message from North Korea.
From North Korea, that's what they're trying to send, especially to us, but also Japan, South Korea, and maybe they're trying to send a message to China as well that North Korea, are not as dependent on China as some of us think. I think we are in a different place with North Korea. For years, the father and the grandfather would talk tough, maybe launch a missile, but then negotiate for some increased aid of some sort. I think that this guy is not interested in negotiation. He wants to have an interballistic missile with a nuclear warhead to threaten us. And I think he's determined to get it. Even failed launches tell them something and improve their program.
So there are a couple of questions I want to ask. First of all, directly, how close is North Korea to developing a nuclear weapon that could hit the U.S. homeland?
Well, we know they have nuclear weapons because they have conducted nuclear tests. The question is, how close are they to an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach our homeland? And the short answer is, we don't know. There are various estimates among the intelligence community on how long it would take. But again, I have no doubt that they are driving toward that, and every test, failure or success, helps them.
Here was North Korea's vice foreign minister this week firing back at President Trump and his warnings. Take a look.
We are taking into account the most aggressive and dangerous option that the U.S. might come up with, and we have also got our options. Our countermeasures ready in our hands, which means we'll go to war if they choose.
You talked about Kim Jong-un, the new young leader, although he's been there 5 years, of North Korea, and that he's determined to get a nuclear weapon and to become a nuclear power. Do you think that he is so unstable, as some suggest, that he might be willing to go to war with the U.S. to achieve that?
I don't think he is suicidal, but he is certainly erratic. And so the most important thing we can do is increase our military presence, especially our missile defense in that area, because we cannot rely on his good judgment to prevent a war. We have to have the military capability there to deny him that ability.
I want to talk about President Trump's posture on this, because I have to say that there was a growing sense of tension. If they don't solve the problem, China, we will. And sending the carrier strike force, as we say, Kim ignored all of that, had this big military parade, had a launch. Yes, it failed, but he still had the launch. And from KT McFarland today, what you got was more of a sense this is a process. It's going to take a while. Let's wait and see with China. Does the U.S. have a clear strategy? And frankly, what are our options? What can we actually do?
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to North Korea, we need to make sure we're tight with our allies, and that's the reason it's very good Vice President Pence is there. We need to keep the pressure on China to rein North Korea in, and their announcements about restricting coal shipments, for example, is a big step forward. That's the biggest export North Korea has, is coal to China. But the third and the most important thing is increase our military presence in the region and our military capability overall. Remember, China does not want to have the new carrier battle group in their backyard. They are not excited about the missile defense deployments in Japan and Korea. Well, the answer for China is to get a hold of this guy in North Korea, and that will reduce the necessity of us increasing military presence.
But Chairman, let's talk realistically about the military threat. If we were to launch a preemptive strike, and there's been some loose talk, I think, in the U.S. about that, to take out North Korea's missile program or nuclear program, they have thousands, I don't have to tell you, of short-range missiles that are on the border. I've been in that area, the DMZ and the 30-mile drive to Seoul, that are aimed at Seoul. That's a metropolis of 20 million people, not to mention the 24,000 U.S. troops. If we were to hit them, they would hit back in Seoul, and it would be a human catastrophe.
Yeah. Number one, I think it is important, as the President says, you don't take options off the table. One of the many mistakes made during the Obama years was to talk about what you would never do. And that just assists your enemy in their calculations. But I also think if we can continue to encourage China to put pressure, increase our military presence in that region, what you may well see is some changes inside North Korea without a conflict. Now, we can't know for sure. What we do have to know, though, is that we have to have the military capability strong enough to prevail if he does something erratic and unexpected.
Let me ask you a different part of this equation. You mentioned it in passing before. How effective is U.S. missile defense, both to protect our allies in the region and to protect the U.S. homeland?
We can knock down missiles, but we need to step on the accelerator to do more for missile defense. It is remarkable. Going back to President Reagan's speech in 1983, there has been political opposition in this country to doing more on missile defense, and we've been scraping for more money, both to deploy more of the systems we have and to put research into new systems. We have been fighting that fight during the Obama years. This is the time to step on the gas, because it's not just North Korea, it's also the Iranians as well as others who are pushing for missiles. We need to be able to knock those down.
I want to take a bigger 30,000-foot look at this. President Trump has authorized the use of force several times in the last 2 weeks. He ordered the cruise missile strikes, 59 cruise missiles on Syria, dropping that huge bomb on ISIS fighters in Afghanistan, and sending a carrier strike force towards North Korea. Question, what message do you think he is sending to our allies and to our enemies?
Well, let's step back for a little context. The Obama years saw U.S. withdrawal from Iraq, reducing our presence in Afghanistan, drawing a red line in Syria, not following it up, and cuts to the defense budget of more than 20% since 2010. And during that time, we saw invasion of Crimea, the Chinese building islands in the South China Sea, etc. President Trump is taking a different approach, thank goodness. He is sending a message that now the United States is going to stand up for our interests and make sure we have the military capability to prevail if we choose to use force. And it's a different message than has been given before.
But here's my question. Is there a strategy behind the use of force? Do you know, as the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, what our strategy is in Syria, in Afghanistan, in North Korea?
Well, I don't think anybody can sit back and say, okay, I know these events will happen over the next year, 2, or 5. But I do think you are seeing a different approach to the world, and it is one that says, not only to adversaries, but to friends who have had questions about us, that we are willing to put the resources into defending ourselves and making the judgments from time to time when it's necessary to use those military resources. That's different than the message that was sent out during the Obama years.
Finally, especially with this increased willingness to use force, does President Trump need to go back to Congress to get authorization for the use of military force in all these arenas, a lot that are far beyond the authorization back in 2001-2 after 9/11?
Well, administrations of both parties have used limited force to advance national interest, whether it was President Reagan bombing Gaddafi in '86 or Clinton trying to get bin Laden in the desert, so forth. Those sorts of limited strikes do not require an action by Congress. I believe that we should, however, update the authorization to use military force against the terrorist networks and have been working to try to do that. So, if it's sustained, if it involves U.S. boots on the ground and lives, then it needs to come to Congress. If it's limited military action, then not so much.
Chairman Thornberry, thank you. Thank you.